Thank you, Tui, and thank you to everyone involved for making this event possible. My name is Sonia Feigenbaum, and I'm the Senior Vice Provost for Global Engagement, and I want to welcome you and say good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We know that many of you are in the Americas, in Europe, and in Asia, and so please introduce yourselves in the chat room, as Tui mentioned. And hopefully that you will make some connections as well. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Texas Global and our mission. We're here to advance the university's academic mission by leading, supporting, and coordinating UT's international engagement efforts, by fostering strategic partnerships on campus and abroad, and by welcoming a cadre of impressive international students and scholars to our campus, as well as by creating opportunities for students and faculty to engage with peers and institutions around the world. I joined UT about 1.5 years ago, and as with all new positions, one tries to think creatively of advancing the mission of the institution. And one of the things that I noticed right away, and even prior to coming on board, during the interview process, was the need to have better connectivity with our alumni around the world. We worked collaboratively to find solutions to engage with our alumni around the world, and then COVID hit. And so we found it to be a moment, an opportune moment for us to think more broadly about how we can connect, and to do so really around the world by not being in a specific location. And so we have now the Texas Global Dialogues, which is a new initiative. And we're really thrilled to launch this initiative because it is in partnership with our friends at the Texas X's. And specifically, I'm really delighted to be joined by the Executive Director, President of the Texas X's, Chuck Harris. As you know, there are numerous chapters and networks in many countries, and those are growing. And we encourage you to learn more about the Texas X's and programs near you. But right now, I would like to introduce you to Chuck Harris, the Executive Director, so that he can give a few words of welcome as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Welcome, Texas X's. You know, when I get feedback from our over 530,000 alumni around the world, what I hear often is, how do we find new ways to bring the university to our alumni who may not be located in Austin? And so the opportunity to partner with Texas Global and Sonia is a fantastic answer to that question that I often get. So hopefully, again, you enjoy the session we have today. Artificial intelligence is a top topic in today's world with machine learning and that sort of thing. So it's very topical. Hopefully, I know the panelists we have today are fantastic and experts in the field, so hopefully you all enjoy that. And again, I want to thank Sonia and Texas Global for bringing the content and the opportunity to partner with the Texas X's to share it around the world. So thank you, and hook 'em.
Thank you, Chuck. And I know that we will do many more of these programs virtually, but I also, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person and to doing those in country when the opportunity arises, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. I'd like to get us started and introduce you to our panelists. We're joined by, and each of our panelists will share with you the work that they've been doing for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we will go into a question and answer mode. I'll ask them some questions, and we would like you to ask questions. So please feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A box. We're joined by Dr. Peter Stone, Dr. Junfeng Jiao, and Dr. Ming-Kung Li. And so we will start with Dr. Peter Stone. Peter, if you can come on, that would be great, and delighted to welcome you.
Thanks, Sonia, and hi, everybody. It's great to see that there's so many people here from around the world. And I'm going to just take a moment or two to introduce myself and my research. I actually wear a bunch of different hats here at UT Austin. I'm currently the Associate Chair of the Department of Computer Science. I'm the Director of Texas Robotics, which is a group that spans multiple departments and actually different colleges, natural sciences and engineering. But I'll talk today about my my research in artificial intelligence and my involvement with the Good Systems Initiative that that Junfeng will also introduce in a little bit more detail. So in just one slide, there's actually a lot of different things that I do in my lab, but I'll try to introduce the overarching research question that I've been investigating for the past 25 years or so, which is, to what degree can autonomous intelligent agents, by which I mean basically you can think of them as possibly robots, but really any computer program that senses the environment, makes decisions, and then has to act. How do these agents learn in the presence of teammates and their adversaries in real-time dynamic domains? And so this is really fundamentally an artificial intelligence question. Like I said, I've been working on it for a long time, long before AI was cool. When I started, AI was sort of, people thought was sort of a dead subject, and now, as you know, it's really taken off. Within artificial intelligence, there are a number of different sub areas that we publish in based on this this question. There's a community of autonomous agents and multi-agent systems, people who think about how do different intelligent entities interact with one another, robotics, and also very much machine learning. How do they, because that's a key part of this, the question at the top of the slide. And there's a particular type of machine learning that I'm particularly focused on, which is known as reinforcement learning. I don't have time to go into the details of that today, but that's a lot of where my research contributions have been. So we work both from the sort of fundamental theoretical perspective, but also from a very applications-oriented point of view. A lot of my research is driven by what kinds of problems can AI not solve yet that sort of require new innovations and solutions. And so I can give sort of a one slide, on this one slide, sort of an overview of some of those motivating domains. So I'm currently the president of the International RoboCup, or Robot Soccer Federation, where there's a team of people around the world trying to create robots that do things like you just saw in that video. Those were fully autonomous. Those were old Sony Aibo robots playing soccer on their own. There's nobody remote controlling them. They have to sense the ball, decide what to do, figure out what to do. That's a video from actually almost 15 years ago now. We've now moved on to working with humanoid robots. So this is a video from also several years ago from the finals of the robot soccer competition, international. This was against a team from a university in Germany. Our robots are the ones with their hands behind their backs. And again, there's no person involved here. They're doing this all on their own. This was the finals of the competition. And here you see our robot going in on a breakaway. We ended up winning this competition. When we came back to the university, they lit the tower orange for us, which was quite an honor. And the goal of RoboCup is by the year, it's an audacious goal, it's by the year 2050 to have a team of humanoid robots that can beat the best World Cup soccer team on a real soccer field. And so we've been making a lot of progress on that, but as you can see from that video, there's still a long way to go. Another sort of grand challenge motivating domain for me is what I call service robots, autonomous service robots, what we call a project, the building-wide intelligence. So if you come to my lab in the Gates-Dell complex, you'll often see robots like this one just wandering around the hallways without you having to ask for a demonstration. We try to make them always on, being able to be a part of the social fabric of the building. And this particular video is describing some research I did jointly with a colleague of mine, Ray Mooney, on natural language processing, having the robot improve its understanding of human language through experience. But these robots need to do many things. They need to navigate. Some of them have arms. They need to be able to manipulate things. They need to be able to interact with people in language, figure out when people want to be helped, when they want to be entertained, when they want to be left alone. It's sort of human robot interaction is the challenge. And then finally, I have been involved with autonomous cars as a great challenge for this research problem. I had a car in the DARPA Urban Challenge back in 2007 with a bunch of students here from UT Austin. Our car is the one here in back. There's no person inside. At this point, it had to find a gap in traffic and turn left. and then come up to the next line here and find another gap in traffic and do that again. It did about 8 laps in 20 minutes. As you know, car companies around the world are improving autonomous cars. So we've actually retired this autonomous car. We don't have it in my lab anymore, but we still think a lot about what the world will look like when all the cars on the road are autonomous. Will we still have traffic signals and stop signs, or will we have intersections that look more like this? This again is a video from several years ago, and it's sort of spawned a decade of research on how can we make autonomous cars interact with human-driven cars and scale this up to large citywide networks. In this video, what's happening is the cars that are white have called ahead for a reservation at the intersection that's guaranteed not to collide with any other car that has a reservation. When they're yellow, they don't have a reservation yet, so they have to stop. But once they turn white, they have a guaranteed path through the intersection that won't collide with other cars. And so again, each of these, I could spend an hour-long talk, describing some of the technical details behind them. I don't have time for that today, but it's just to give you a sense of the challenge problems that drive me in my research. And I'll just say one more thing, which is I said I wear a number of hats. Another is that I'm the standing committee chair of a group called the 100-Year Study on Artificial Intelligence, that about 4 years ago came out with a report, and we're now ramping up to do a follow-up report on the impacts of artificial intelligence on society. And this is designed for public consumption. So if you're interested in this topic, even if you don't have a technical background, I strongly encourage you to come and read this. Gives my view of sort of what are the likely realistic, from an AI insider perspective, the realistic likely outcomes, both positive and negative, of artificial intelligence in the coming years. And this was, I present this as sort of a segue to Junfeng, who's going to talk about our joint work on how this has led into a interdisciplinary initiative here at UT Austin on good systems. And so with that, I'll come back later for questions and turn it over to Junfeng.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Junfeng Jiao. Let me share my slide. Oh, Peter, you have to stop the screen sharing. Again, my name is Junfeng Jiao. I'm a associate professor in School of Architecture, also director of Urban Information Lab, also the chair of a Good System initiative at UT Austin, also the Hampton Endowed Chair in Transportation. Let me make sure you can see the screen. My research only focuses on two areas, smart city and urban informatics. So this is my research lab, urban information lab. We use a different information technology to measure cities and trying to understand how the built environment can affect people's behavior. Within this different technology, machine learning and deep learning is one major area we focus on. We use the different machine learning techniques, trying to understand the people's behavior and how we change environment gonna affect the people's behavior. For example, we measured people's vehicle mile travel during the pandemic and after pandemic. We use historical data to predict how people will travel when the pandemic's over. This is one project. Another project I want to talk about is Austin is a urban health risk mapping project. So basically, we use the crowdsourcing technology trying to understand how, again, built environment affect people's health. We use the 911 call and 311 call data, historical data, trying to understand how people's health is related to crowdsourced data. So for example, give you, say in your neighborhood, if you change your sidewalk density or crosswalk density, how that might affect your health status. We use machine learning and the previous data trying to understand the relationship between them two. And we use also use the machine learning to predict the future health status and how the environment change will affect your future health. That's a two project I want to talk about. And we also have a lab site, this site.utexas.edu, the URL. We have a lot of cool projects like how do we access to different public transportation method, like a bus, e-scooter, and how to better locate the resources according to demand. Again, we use the machine learning trying to learn from historical data, trying to measure people's travel pattern and better allocate the resources to meet the demand. I encourage you to check out this website. Another project I want to mention is Austin House AI housing analysis. As you may know, in many cities in the US, we experience housing shortage. So how can we use computer technology, especially AI, trying to better plan future cities, especially future housing project? Again, we looked at 30 years housing data, housing development data in city of Austin. We're trying to find out how can we better develop cities to meet the future demand. Again, both urban health risk tracking and Austin housing AI analysis are two good system projects funded in my lab. So what is good system? We will talk about it in the following part. Both Peter and I, a founding member of a good system. In one sentence, we try to design ethical system to benefit ethical AI system to benefit the whole society. That's the goal for Go System. So if you are interested in Go System, we actually happen to have first annual symposium coming up in the next week. So if you're interested, please go on to event.gosystem.utexas.edu to register. So again, thank you for joining us, and I will turn my microphone to Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Junfeng.
Okay, hi. Okay, now I think I can share the screen. Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Ming-Kung Li, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Information. So I'm really excited to be on this panel today and introduce our lab research with the UT Austin alumni all over the world. So AI is everywhere now. It influences how we go one place to another, who is getting offered jobs, and how cities allocate resources, like what Junfeng just mentioned. And then we know that the AI or algorithm can make our lives and work more efficient. And that's why AI is being introduced in so many industries after all. However, many of you probably have also heard that AI can make unfair, discriminatory decisions in AI-managed workplaces like Uber or Amazon warehouses, compromise worker well-being and to maximize efficiency. So the question our group asks is, how can we use AI to create communities, organizations, and cities that are trustworthy, fair, and good to work and live in? So to answer this question, our lab takes an interdisciplinary approach. So we use social science method to build foundational knowledge on psychological and social impacts of AI. We then use this knowledge to design equitable and transparent AI to improve human decision-making. Our current work is taking place in 3 major domains. So in AI-infused work, we are investigating how to empower gig workers through a community-driven approach. In the domain of public assistance and social work, we are exploring how to use AI to assist social workers to make fair decisions and provide more effective personalized services for people, like populations that are marginalized. And finally, we are investigating how we can make healthcare AI more trustworthy and equitable. So we don't have time to go into details of each of these projects. So I will give one example project where we thought to build fair and participatory AI for social good. So one of the causes of the problem in the AI system deployed in the real world is that many of them are built in silo and based on developers' assumptions on what ideal values the system should embody. So in our work, we propose a participatory framework that enables multiple stakeholders to be part of the algorithm design, so that the actual people who will use and who are affected by this AI system can have their own voice and then have their own values reflected in this AI system. So we call this framework as We Build AI framework. So the key idea is to build a computational model representing each individual stakeholders and to have the model negotiate or vote on its individual's behalf. This works like a group of people making a decision together. But instead of an individual being in the rooms, virtual computational models of each individual's decision-making process will make a group decision for each algorithmic decisions. We apply this framework to a nonprofit called 412 Food Rescue. So this is an organization that's like Uber for charities. They take food donations from donors such as grocery store, restaurant, retail stores, and allocate them to nonprofits that help underserved food insecure communities. They use an app to coordinate volunteers to pick up and deliver the donation to the nonprofit. So we work with the organization's four stakeholders: volunteers, recipients, the organization themselves, and donors. And these stakeholders use our Will Build AI framework to build the matching algorithms. So we first ask these stakeholders to tell us what factors should be considered in matching algorithms. And we then use these features to model these individuals' belief on what matching algorithms should work like. So I will not go over details on how this particular process works, but you can refer to the paper if you're interested in. We then, for each incoming donation, once we have each individual stakeholder model, these models created a rank list of potential recipients for incoming donation. So these individual lists were aggregated using a voting rule to create final recommendation list. And in the final step of the framework, we explain the algorithmic decisions so that the actual stakeholder in the organization can use these decision tools to support their operations. So what did we learn from this process of building an algorithm with stakeholders? One, when we tested the algorithm, we learned that it actually improved the equity in donation distributions, giving more areas with higher poverty rates without increasing travel distances. What was also very interesting and meaningful about this work was that the experience itself brought out changes in our participants. They felt that the matching algorithm was fair and improved their trust. It improved their trust in the governing organizations. It also increased their awareness in AI systems. Like they initially said they are very skeptical because these are decisions that involve caring for others. But after going through the experiences, they now said they wholeheartedly believe that AI can make such decisions. To wrap up, I'd like to go back to the original question that I raised in the beginning. The We Build AI project, as well as other projects from our lab, show that it is really important to work with end users of AI in the public so that we can shape the future of AI together and make it work for all. So I look forward to continuing this discussion on the future of AI in society and hearing others' opinions in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. I think we've had the opportunity to look at the diversity and variety of engagement with AI. Our three panelists are from distinct colleges and schools. We have the College of the School of Architecture and the College of Natural Sciences, as well as the School of Information, which really points to the idea that interdisciplinarity is extremely important when it comes to artificial intelligence. And so I have a few questions, and we looked at, we heard from Peter Stone about the RoboCup as well as autonomous cars. We also heard about the connection between making decisions, understanding life and work, and machine learning to predict human behavior. And then now with the example that Min just gave us about the 412 food rescue, we're looking, Min is looking at how AI systems are developed, and the idea of not developing them in silos being more positive for the impact that they will have on society. So I have a few questions that I would like to ask. And the first question I think will be to any of our panelists. It has to do with the connection between wanting to advance science and specifically advance AI, artificial intelligence, and connect that with ethics and the ethical approach to doing so. Min, you talked about the importance of bringing various stakeholders so that there's representation of multiple points of views and so forth. But I think what's interesting, and what interests me and probably most of our friends around the world today, is how do you reconcile this deep interest and the positive aspect of AI with the impact that it may have on society that could be viewed as potentially difficult from an ethical perspective? So any of you or all of you are welcome to answer that question.
Well, I can jump in. It's yeah, I mean, that's obviously a very topical question. It's important, and you know, it's become, over the course of my career, become very much more important because AI is starting to have the potential to be used by many people. And you know, I think there's it's important to recognize that you know, the artificial intelligence isn't one thing. This is actually one of the you know, biggest messages of that AI 100 study that I pointed you to. It's really a collection of different technologies, and you know, each one has different potential uses, potential benefits, potential harms, and like almost any technology, it's really, you know, there's choices to be made by the stakeholders in how it is used. And you know, just like, you know, there's many technologies can be used for good or can be used for nefarious purposes. It's up to you know, at some level, it's up to society to, you know, put the safeguards in, but it's also, as Min said, it's also, you know, will work out much better if people who are designing AI systems from the beginning keep the stakeholders in mind. And so one of the themes that we've been articulating within good systems is that, you know, we shouldn't, it's not that we should build everything that we can. You don't want to build a new AI technology because we can. You want to build an AI technology because we should. And you know, what does it mean to, you know, for something to be a good system? And in fact, you know, the things that we're striving for in that is to understand how do you define a system being good? What does it actually mean, you know, to be good? How do you evaluate whether a system is good? And then what are the best principles for designing good systems? And these are each sort of meaty questions that really shouldn't just be answered by the computer scientists and the technologists. It's, you know, these are social science, policy questions, humanities questions, and that's, you know, this being able to study them in the context of a a university like UT Austin that has expertise across the spectrum is really important. So, but I mean, I guess I could say a lot more, but I'm sure Junfeng and Min would like to chime in on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Peter. That's a very good discussion. I think it's need a whole army of researchers to solve this problem. UT has launched the Grand Challenge ecosystem across the 2,000 of schools. We work together trying to address this important problem. How can we define a system good? How can we design a good system? How can we basically implement? In the last 2 years, we have funded also 22 projects trying to solve this problem. Again, we are not asking what AI can do. We ask what AI should or should not do so they can benefit the whole society, not just segment of the population. I think that's a super important question for all of us to work on together.
Yeah, just to add what Peter and Junfeng said briefly, it occurs to me that like 10 to 15 years ago when social media was new, it was a brand new website that people used to network with people, and very few people talked about ethical implication back then, but it grew out something bigger than a benign social network where you can meet your friends, and it's making all kinds of big impact on a lot of decisions. So I'm glad that the first step for making any technology, like the discussion about making ethical technology, is to start having conversation. And right now there are so many groups and or initiatives that bring together this interdisciplinary scholars so we can think about these issues upfront. So I think that's a great start.
So I'd actually like, maybe I can just, because there was a question in the Q&A channel that I think is relevant to this, about, it's very relevant in the context of autonomous cars. It was asked, are people taking into account that there might be different norms in different societies, in different countries? And I think, that's actually a really good question, and something I've thought about a lot. There is work in the community thinking about that. And the example given in the Q&A chat was what happens if a car has no choice of when where to crash? Should it if there's sort of only bad choices it can make, which choice should it make? And there is actually a very large scale project on this called the Moral Machines Project that a colleague of mine, Iyad Rawan, is a leader of. But I actually think that this is the sort of what people popularly call the trolley problem, the problem of if a car has to if there's a trolley going down a track and it's either going to keep going straight and kill one person, or you could pull a lever if it's going to keep going straight and it would kill 5 people, or you can pull a lever and it'll change the track it's going down and then it would kill 1 person. And this is sort of a dilemma of, do you take an action to cause something bad to happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, but maybe is a lesser evil? This has been the focus of a lot of attention in the sort of philosophy and AI community, but I think it actually misses the point of the question, which is that this is a challenge or a problem that most drivers never have to face, that most autonomous cars hopefully will never have to face. There are many other social norms that are much smaller within that are different across cultures. And to give an example, I used to live in Pittsburgh, where there's this concept of a Pittsburgh left, where like when the light turns green, people turn left before other people opposing them keep going straight through the light. And if you try to do that in other cities, you'll get honked at and run over. And being able to have that be something that's configurable is important. It shouldn't be the AI engineer sitting in the lab that decides how autonomous cars should work everywhere across the world. There needs to be sort of hooks left for society to make these kinds of decisions, that there's technical algorithmic focus that the engineers and computer scientists should be doing, and then there's the value judgments that should be left and for the democratic process or whatever process is used for decision making in various communities. And this separation, I think, is starting to become acknowledged, but I think it's still not the norm, and we, you know, that's sort of one of the efforts that all of us are trying to work towards, is to have people become more comfortable with this separation between, you know, the technical aspects of how something works and then the practical realities that may differ across societies. So it's a great question.
Thank you. We have another question from Sean Lian. What kind of hardware requirement would you need to do the AI algorithm calculation? Do you need advanced semiconductor technology, for example, the 5nm or 3nm or 2nm? A little bit technical, but that's good.
Yeah, I can answer that pretty quickly. It's I mean, the way, one definition of AI is getting computers to do the things they can't do yet. Which is sort of a tongue-in-cheek definition, but it's, you know, sort of always keeps us in business because there's always new things that computers can't do yet. But it sort of also illuminates the perspective that I take, which is that you use the best hardware you can, the best hardware that's available, the things that hardware can do without any sophisticated algorithms, you let it do. And then AI is trying to sort of stretch beyond that, to add new algorithms and new techniques to sort of stretch the hardware beyond its capabilities. And so I sort of take the opposite perspective. It's not what hardware do you need, it's what hardware do you have available in the context of the problem you're working on, and then what algorithms do you need to sort of push that hardware as far as you possibly can.
Thank you. I have a question that's a little bit unrelated, and then we'll go to a question by Shumi Akhtar. My question has to do with, you know, some of us who speak several languages understand that the mental processes associated with speaking a language and expressing yourself are very important, so that they can be understood in very different ways, and we can arrive at different conclusions or even the same conclusions, but in a different manner. And so my question has to do with the connection of artificial intelligence in the way that you conceptualize it and you create the algorithms, connected to the fact that essentially someone else or another thing is creating the process for you from an algorithmic perspective. How do you connect that, or how do you take into consideration the aspect of the mental processes? That's number one. And number two is, how much of artificial intelligence is essentially going to affect us in negative ways in terms of us not using our brain for things that seem to be completely innocuous, but that can be very important from a cognitive perspective? That goes
I'm happy to answer, but yeah, I'm happy to answer. But I've been hogging the microphone. So Junfeng or Min, if you want to jump in, go for it. Otherwise, I can go again.
I think, Sonia, the second part is really interesting. How the AI gonna negatively affect your brain development. I'm not a biologist by any means, but I feel like just like any technology, where it has good side and bad side. So I often imagine in the long run, if we rely on like a voice recognition and voice commanding technology, our communication skill will running down. And I see myself have that problem if I stay online too much. I'm social skill going down, and that's just my personal observation. Again, by no means I'm not a biologist, neuroscientist in that aspect, but I think again we have to think about how the especially voice control gonna negatively affect your communication skills.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to say something?
Sure. I mean, you ask a lot of different things in that question. I mean, there's a lot to say. I mean, I think, you know, all technologies have this kind of, you know, possibility of effects, right? I mean, you could have asked that question about the automobile. Would it make us stop using our legs? And, you know, would the telephone make us stop seeing each other face to face? I mean, it's all a question of how people end up using it. And, you know, people in societies, you know, it's sort of up to us to figure out how to make these technologies augmenting and and enhancing of our lives. And that is one of the sort of questions. One of the ways I like describing good systems is there's sort of two axes. There's one axis of technologies that will be adaptable or adapted by people. Adopted, I guess, is the best word. That will be adopted by people versus technologies that are good for people. And there's sort of very characterized examples. Social media is something that's very easily adopted by people, but not necessarily good, right? And there's a lot of questions now is social media making our lives better or worse? And then there's things that I think if they were adopted would be very good, but people are very reluctant to adopt. And I use sort of autonomous driving as an example of that. I think if all the cars on the road were autonomous right now, we'd have many fewer accidents. But people are sort of reluctant to give up give up driving. And our goal in good systems is to get into that upper quadrant, things that people will adopt, but also will be good for society. With regards to some of the other parts of your question, the different cognitive processes. I mean, artificial intelligence has for a long time taken inspiration from neuroscience and the way people do things and what we know about the way people do things, which actually in many ways is not very much. There's still a lot of frontiers in neuroscience. Some people do artificial intelligence research from the perspective of how can we understand human thinking and human mental processes by building replicas and studying them. And others think of artificial intelligence more from an engineering perspective of how can we get behaviors that we think of as intelligent, but not at all concerned with whether it's the same way that people do them. And the sort of cliche example of that is you can use a bird as an example of an animal that flies, but from an engineering perspective, you're happy with an airplane. It doesn't have to fly like a bird does. It doesn't have to flap its wings. You just want the flying behavior. And so the sort of camp that I come from in artificial intelligence is more this sort of, this perspective of let's build intelligent things and not worry about, if it's the same way that people do that go through the processes to arrive at the same things. On the other hand, if those intelligent things we're building need to interact with people, like the Building Wide Intelligence project that I told you about, robots interacting with people, then they're going to need to understand the cues and the processes that people are going through, and how do you recognize the emotion a person is showing and use that as part of your decision mechanism with regards to how the robot should interact with that person. And so there's a lot of depth to the question you ask. There's a lot of different angles to get at it from.
Thank you. I may ask a follow-up question, but I'd like to share some of the questions from our audience. Shumi Akhtar just asked, how do you think artificial intelligence and machine learning can solve some of the pressing problems in the financial market, such as maximizing efficiency in the international trading and investment realm? Anybody can answer that?
I mean, I have done some work also on autonomous bidding agents that bid in auctions. I think there are, there's again, possible positives and possible, possible negatives. There, the flash crashes and things. If there's algorithmic trading that is all, that many different programs are all doing very much the same thing and take the same cues, you can get sort of, spiraling effects that feed off of each other. So there's some dangers, and there's also been a lot of, sort of when you're working on algorithmic trading and really fast decision making, there's also, sort of becomes a big pressure to have very short wires and faster decision times and things like that. That can also lead to sort of, I think, detrimental effects and inefficiencies. But there's also, from the perspective of a market being a signal of aggregating lots of different information into a numeric quantity, into a prediction of what's going to happen in the future, there are, sort of opportunities for artificial intelligence and agents to be able to, for instance, digest and synthesize the day's news from around the world and current events and other, sort of trends that could affect the market into sort of aggregated information sources that are maybe that are more efficient and reduce the opportunities for arbitrage that happen when it's human decision makers, sort of following the words of the last politician or something like that. So, I don't think I think there's, it's a potentially powerful tool in the financial markets, and a lot of people are putting it to use. But I think there's, again, good sides and bad sides to the way it can be used and to the possible effects, and we need to be cognizant of those when sort of designing the next generation financial markets, taking into account what can go wrong and what efficiencies can be leveraged.
Thank you. There was another question pertinent to the connection between artificial intelligence and climate change events, such as the California wildfires. What can be done to address the high energy of cost of AI?
Min or Junfeng, do you want to take that, or do you want? I can keep going. I can always keep talking, but I feel like I'm answering all the questions.
Sonia, sorry, I missed you said the high energy cost of AI.
Yes. What can be done to address the high energy cost of AI? And it's from Barnaby Ash, the question.
That's a really, really interesting question. First, I think it's like any technologies, AI is going to change our environment and going to change our society dramatically. And if you talk about electricity consumption, yes, when you come to data centers, that's going to incur a lot of energy consumption. But that's just it's just one part in the development process, and I'm sure engineering are working day and night trying to reduce energy consumption related to data centers. But that's just a part of a development process, and I would let the other panelists to answer this question.
Yeah, go ahead, Min.
Yeah, just to comment from the human perspective, actually this has become an issue. And there has been a recent initiative that helps people to think about, when you design this AI, what will be the footprint of this training and building this AI system, and use it as a one decision criteria to determine whether we should even design AI to address these problems. So I'm glad that this is some metric that we should more and more start thinking about when we're deciding when to use AI.
So I'll add, just from a more technical perspective, there's sort of been three largely speaking, three periods of AI research. And the current one we're in is very much fueled by deep neural networks, or have been commonly known in the past just neural networks. It's sort of a new term to call it deep learning, but it's really just neural networks that sort of re-energized the field in the past 5 to 10 years. Because of some really sort of surprising results. The technology has been around for 20 to 30 years. But really, what's going on today is a lot of AI systems that are based on neural networks that do take a lot of energy, a lot of training, a lot of data. But that's not the only type of artificial intelligence. The period, the first sort of wave of artificial intelligence was symbolic reasoning and logic-based programming. And then after that, there was sort of probabilistic modeling and Bayesian reasoning. And a lot of what can be done now is sort of the pendulum has swung very strongly towards these neural network-based approaches. But they can't solve everything. They're not the end of the story. And in fact, there's a lot of strengths of the two previous types of approaches, statistical approaches and logic-based approaches, that neural networks still haven't caught up to. And so one of the things that can be done to reduce the energy footprint is to investigate methods for combining these three different paradigms. And that's actually something I'm deeply involved in my own research, is putting together all three of these, the sort of symbolic planning, probabilistic modeling, and neural networks. and trying to find new techniques to achieve the same successes as neural networks, but with less data, less computation. And so this is one of the challenges, and both for energy consumption and sort of climate change kinds of reasons, and also just because there are fundamentally problems that you don't have a lot of data for, or you don't have a lot of computation for. And so again, I think it's important to recognize many people coming into the field today think of AI equals neural networks, and it's just not the case. And so that's my answer to this problem, is we need to sort of remember the history and the legacy of past successes in the field, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Thank you. My friend Chuck Harris has a couple of questions. Chuck, if you wanted to ask those questions, that would be great.
Hold on, I'm trying. Yeah, I had two questions for you. The first is, how is UT commercializing this technology? But more importantly, I'd love to hear, when you go to sleep at night and dream, and you're not constrained, obviously, what is your greatest hope for this technology?
I mean, other than beating the best World Cup soccer team?
That would be great. I'd be happy beating Oklahoma on Saturday if you could help us in that. But yes, a World Cup soccer team would work as well.
No, more seriously, I mean, my hope for AI technology is that it helps make the world a better place. And I think often when I give talks to the public, I like to ask a question at the end of the talk, which is, and actually this is a great question to ask with your friend group, or in at a dinner party or something like that, is if you had a choice of being born 100 years earlier than you were born, or 100 years later than you were born, which would you choose? You never give people a choice of just being born when they were, because everybody fears change. So everyone would pick the status quo. But if basically this question, would you go backwards or would you go forwards? And this is fundamentally a question about, is technology, or is the world becoming a better place over time? And jumping forwards 100 years is a leap of faith. A lot of things can go wrong between now and then. Technology or other factors could make, including climate change, could make the world much worse. But for myself and most of my colleagues, it's a fairly easy answer, is that I'm very optimistic about the effects that these kinds of technologies can have on really solving more problems than they cause. But it's not it is not straightforward. There are very compelling reasons that it would be, that your life would be better off if you moved backwards 100 years, and you'd be closer to your nuclear family. There are many technologies around now that arguably, because they weren't around then, your life would have been better. That it gets messy if you talk about, start talking about healthcare, then I think that's a strong argument for the moving forwards rather than moving backwards. But there's a lot of sort of layers of the onion to peel off in a conversation like this. And just, from my perspective, I'm optimistic. My dream is that 100 years from now, people look back and think the thing that has made the world better than it was back in the early 21st century is advances in artificial intelligence.
Thank you. We have a question from Sam Oh in South Korea. If the School of Information creates a track of human-centered AI, what should be covered in this track? This is a question. This is addressed to Dr. Lee.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe we already have a track called Human-Centered Data Science that we launched when we were launching the undergraduate program this year. So in that program, we cover ethical and humanities foundation for what it means to understand what it means to be humans. We also cover technical knowledge and basic skills in how to apply machine learning and how to analyze data. And we teach students how to apply human-centered design methods so that they can combine these two camps of knowledge to create the AI systems. So we'll say this will be like 3 prolonged or 3-legged program where you will learn these interdisciplinary skills.
Sonia, can I just add one thing to Chuck's question and also Peter's explanation? I think that's very good example to think about AI. So I would say if you wake up, say you sleep 100 years, you wake up from 1900 to early 2000, you see the world almost the same. You drive a car, you have electricity, you have everything. And I think that's basically saying in the last 100 years, technology improvement has not dramatically changed our life. It's some incremental improvement, but not in a fundamental way. So if we follow, like Peter's example, if you follow that example, I wish if you sleep right now and wake up 100 years from now, the world will be dramatically different with what you're living right now. And I want to say, I hope that change is coming from AI. AI make that change. I think AI has the potential to do that. So that's what I'm dreaming for in the night. So when you wake up 100 years from now, the world will be quite different from how you're living right now.
Yeah, it's my last comment too, because that question is so interesting, Chuck. What keeps me awake, or what I think about a lot at night, is that there are a lot of criticism actually for the use of AI in human decision making, like hiring, social work, loan decisions, judicial decisions. Like people say the AI are unfair, discriminatory, etc. But what people often don't say is that, in fact, unfortunately, human systems without AI was very biased as well, but it was never under this tight scrutiny, and no one really explicitly talked about it. So to me, the grand challenge is actually how do we use AI with the humans so that we can actually improve these human decision making in these all important decisions.
Thank you. We have a question for Peter. Will third generation of AI be a combination of symbolic knowledge, logic, reasoning approach with neural network, deep learning, or machine learning?
Yeah, as I was saying before, I think it's I mean, in some sense, third generation is neural networks. First generation was logic. Second generation is sort of probabilistic reasoning and Bayes networks. And then third generation is neural networks. And I think maybe you could say the fourth generation, or maybe is the combination of these. I think that's an active area of research. I think it's a very important area of research. Or maybe it's not the fourth generation. Maybe it's just that's the combination of these past 3 generations. Depends how you want to define it. But I think yes, I'm not a proponent of trying to do everything with neural networks. I think there's a lot to be said for bringing in the strengths of some of the past approaches, understanding what the strengths and weaknesses of each of these kinds of approaches are, and then trying to combine them and get the best of all worlds.
Thank you. I have a question about transnational collaboration. If you could speak a little bit to one of the things that strengthens an institution and then the work that we do in general as researchers has to do with our ability to collaborate with numerous individuals, not only in our country, but across the world. Could you speak to us a little bit about just your engagement with peers across the world and how that's in many ways shaped the work that you do and advanced it?
I can chime in on that, Sonia. So I have a good habit to travel. You can call bad habit a good habit. So I like to travel. So when I travel, I like to establish connection with a colleague who has a similar research institute with myself. So in the last 2 years, I visited Japan a couple of times, and we actually met some colleagues from Tokyo University and Tokyo Metropolitan University. We established a collaboration on investigating how the autonomous driving vehicle going to affect elder people's commute pattern, and we actually won the President Global Learning Award. We we expected to go there in the 2020 Summer Olympic game, but the pandemic changed everything. So again, we hope go there in the next year summer. I would say, to answer your question, the cross-country collaboration is benefit everybody. Even we build on a fair ground, it can benefit everybody. I just think that's the wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
So I have, I mean, I have lots of different international collaborations. I mean, starting with my own research group here at UT, I have students, PhD students and postdocs from various different countries, from India, from Israel, from Iran, from China, and have in the past from Brazil and other places. I've also myself spent a year abroad with my family. I spent a year on sabbatical in Israel, working at Hebrew University and Bar-Ilan University. And I'm president right now of, like I said, the RoboCup Federation, the Robot Soccer World Cup. That is a very, very international organization with colleagues in Singapore and Australia and South America, all through Europe, and you know, we come together with a sort of a common goal, and you know, with students working on sort of very similar objectives all around the world, and meet periodically. The event was canceled this year for obvious reasons, but otherwise every year for the past 20, 25 years or so, come together, and you know, I've seen many of the same people over that time. They're some of my closest friends, some of my close colleagues. We exchange students, we've written papers together. Very, very international organization and collaboration, and it's led to all kinds of contacts throughout the world that have really shaped my career in tons of different ways.
Yeah, I'd like to add that one benefit from international collaboration is that we can think about the cultural differences and how we might need to adapt different AI systems for different cultures. So I have one collaborative project with people in National University of Singapore. We're looking at what fairness means in urban planning. And we're thinking about like what that means in the Singapore context versus in the United States. So that gives me an opportunity to think about like going beyond American-centric view, like how this should be adapted to different parts of the world.
Thank you. I think in line with that question, I'm wondering if you could speak, Peter, you mentioned your work with postdocs and PhD students, but could all of you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with undergraduate students and opportunities that you see, and how you would encourage artificial intelligence as a pursuit, an academic pursuit, because you're coming from such different vantage points?
Yeah, so in my case, I'm actually I've done research with undergrads throughout my time here, but now actually starting in 2008 or so, for the past 12 years or so, I've run a stream in what we call the Freshman Research Initiative, which is a program run under the College of Natural Sciences. Almost half of our incoming freshmen in the College of Natural Sciences, so about 500 students a year, go through the FRI, Freshman Research Initiative, where they're assigned to a research lab in their spring semester of freshman year to get introduced to research. And so every year for the past more than 10 years, I've had 30 to 35 undergraduate freshmen in my lab, working specifically first on the autonomous driving project, autonomous cars, and then now on the building wide intelligence project and the human robot interaction kinds of things. And many of those undergrads then go on to do an independent project in the fall semester of their sophomore year to become peer mentors to the next crop of freshmen when they're in the spring of their sophomore year, and then go on to do, to publish research in the lab in their junior and senior years, sometimes doing undergraduate honors theses. And then, many of them do go on to graduate school and successful careers afterwards. And so the Freshman Research Initiative, there's several different streams across all of natural sciences. There's a few in computer science. I run, like I say, one on autonomous robots, but there's many in biology and physics and chemistry. It's a really great program and a really innovative program. We were the leaders of this at UT, and it's now being replicated across the country. And it's really important because it gets undergrads exposed to the idea of research early in their career, rather than when they still have time to understand and use it as a motivator for taking classes, as opposed to the model before where they'd come in and, in their senior year, maybe do a research project, but then, and then be gone. This way, as freshmen, some of them are ready for it and get deeply involved and stay in research throughout their time as an undergrad, and others realize as freshmen, I'm not cut out for research, or I'm not ready for research, but now I understand what I need to learn in my traditional classroom classes so that I'll be ready for research later in the later in my undergrad career and possibly on to grad school. So it's been a fantastic program, and it's been really rewarding for me to have lots of many more undergrads working in my lab than I was able to before the freshman research initiative.
Thank you. Min, did you want to talk about your work with undergraduate students as well?
Yes, I work with many undergraduate students in my research. To me, what's been great is that because even though they're young, they're junior, they can come from such a wide range of background. So I've been working with people who study history, who have studied ethics, in addition to computer science, information science. So sometimes our goal is teach them about research, but in other cases, they also bring in their own knowledge from their own disciplines, and it can be a seed for like a new collaboration or a new interdisciplinary work. So I really enjoy working with undergrad students in the past.
Sonia, I just want to add some comment on this topic. I'm developing a undergraduate minor, you can call minor. It's a smart city. It's just launched. It's basically trying to use the computer technology and especially AI and machine learning, trying to measure and quantify and manage the city, make it smarter. So we have included this year, the first cohort has 12 students from very diverse background, from computer science, geography, ECE, even finance. Everybody become interested in this related topic. I really enjoy work with them. I just feel they bring energy, and sometimes they have wonderful ideas, and even they don't have any idea, just they bring energy that make me feel young. And I think that's the future of our society. I really enjoy work with them.
Thank you. I have a question about smart cities, Junfeng, since you mentioned it. And I know that the work that you were doing for the President's Awards for Global Learning, where you were going to go to Japan, was intricately connected to, I think, populations with either cognitive disability or disability in general, if I remember correctly. And if I don't remember it correctly, I am actually very interested in the connection between artificial intelligence, smart cities, and the ways in which we can enable our elderly populations or populations with cognitive neurodegenerative issues, how we can support them in being part of our society rather than being parked away in the way that many societies do for either a lack of understanding, of fear, or whatever the case may be. Could you speak to that, Junfeng, and anybody else who's willing to tackle that subject?
Sure, that's a super great question. So I think that's a fundamental question for research like us. We design AI system, a good system. We want to benefit the whole society, not just a segment of society. And when we aging, and everybody, all the country almost coming to the aging society, especially East Asian country, and US will follow. So we want to include everybody. For the elderly population, we want to include them, not exclude them. Specifically in terms of technology, like autonomous driving vehicle. We just finished our first web survey compare their perception between US and Japan. So interesting enough, in Japan, people actually have a little fear or negative impact, negative perception of autonomous driving vehicle on the same age population group compared to the US. We don't know why, and we will basically gonna further research on that. And the US result from age 60 to 75, they are very open to autonomous driving technologies. And in Japan, people are a little worrisome about will that hurt them. So again, we don't know why, and but that's one important area personally drive me, how we can include every population, every aging group or minority group, vulnerable group to be benefited by the technology development. And that's also a goal for smart city. How can we make city inclusive enough to benefit everybody? Thank you for this question.
Thank you so much. We're about to come to a close for our session today. I think this was a very informative conversation. At least it was for me. I hope that for our alumni who are with us today, I hope you took away as much as from the session as I did and as Chuck did. And we obviously considered this topic because we spoke to many of you, and we learned that this was a topic that is really interesting and important to you. I want to make sure that you register if you're interested in the Good Systems Project, the symposium. The link is in the chat room. And where we'll have subsequent Texas Global Dialogues with the Texas X's. The next one will take place in November, and will focus on energy. Renewable energy and sustainability. We're happy to welcome everybody from all over the world. We're trying to make these, plan these around world regions, across world regions, so that we can have as many participants as possible. I think if there's one silver lining of us not being able to travel, is that we want to make sure that we can engage across the world. We will send you an email with a recording of the event and a brief survey. And we would love to hear more about the topics that you're interested in for future Texas Global Dialogues. We also ask that you follow us on social media, although I didn't ask the question, but we touched upon that. There is a documentary film called The Social Dilemma that's quite interesting right now, speaking about the negative impact of social media on society. And interestingly enough, the individuals that are talking about it are those that actually created it. So I think that's an interesting, it's always important to look at any development, whether it's technological or not, from various perspectives. And we did that today, and to really question and analyze and make sure that we're very much aware of some of the caveats. So we will send you the email, and I want to thank you for attending. And also, if our panelists have closing remarks, and Chuck, if you have closing remarks, please let's move forward to these closing remarks, and wish everybody a wonderful day. Min, did you want to?
Oh, thank you for having us today. It was very interesting.
And Junfeng and Peter.
Well, thank you so much for having us. I really enjoyed it. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for organizing, and thanks for everyone who attended and asked great questions.
And Chuck?
Yes, thanks everybody. And I was only half joking when I suggested that AI might help our football team. So if any of you feel so compelled, I'm pretty sure Tom Herman would be open to any advice you have. So thank you all, and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, whether it's starting or whether it's going to be tomorrow for you. Thank you.